everybody, my name is Regan Miner and I'm the Executive Director of the Norwich Historical Society. I'm delighted to be here today to bring you a virtual tour of the Benedict Arnold Walking Trail. The Benedict Arnold Walking Trail is a part of the Walk Norwich Trail System, which you can see on walknorwich.org. The Walk Norwich Trail Systems are a series of self-guided trails designed to tell residents and visitors about Norwich's rich history. The self-guided trails have a brochure and also interpretive signage along the trails. You can see all of them, and I mean all of them, on walknorwich.org. Today we're going to talk about the Benedict Arnold Walking Trail, which is really focused in the Norwich Town Historic District. The Benedict Arnold Walking Trail talks about Norwich's rich colonial era history, while obviously talking about Norwich's infamous native son, Benedict Arnold. So we're standing here in the Norwich Town Colonial Burying Ground. You can access the burying ground off of Old Cemetery Lane or off of East Town Street. The Old Norwich Town Burying Ground was established in 1699. The earliest recorded burial is 1706. As you can see, the burying ground is quite expansive, but it's also quite hilly. And the reason why they chose this area to put a burying ground is because it was very hilly and unsuitable for farming. Farming needs a very flat surface, a very flat ground to do their planting, and this area of Norwich was very hilly, so it made the most sense for them to put a burying ground here. Now this is the second oldest burying ground here in Norwich. The first burying ground we call the Founders Cemetery, or the Post-Engager Cemetery. That's located on Lee Avenue off of West Town Street. That's where many of the 35 Norwich founding families are buried. Unfortunately, there are no tombstones there to mark their graves like there are here. There's just a stone monument saying all of the founding families' names listed on the sides, which is still very interesting and cool to see. The interesting fact about this burying ground in particular is there are over 7,000 recorded burials, but there's only 1,200 tombstones remaining. So there's many areas here in the burying ground where there's likely people buried, but we just don't have tombstones for them, unfortunately. There are a lot of famous people buried here in the burying ground, a lot of Revolutionary War veterans, but we also have Samuel Huntington buried here, who was the signer of the Declaration of Independence. And some people claim he's the first president of the United States, since he was president of the Continental Congress when we were governed under the Articles of Confederation. Other people buried here, which we're going to talk about in a moment, are Benedict Arnold's family. So Benedict Arnold was born in Norwich on January 14, 1741. The Arnold family homestead was located between Bacchus Hospital and the Norwich Free Academy. There's a plaque actually outside of the house. Today it's a raised ranch. Back then it would have been a beautiful colonial house. There's a plaque outside on the corner of Arnold Place and Washington Street where the home originally stood. Benedict Arnold's father was also named Benedict Arnold. In fact, Benedict Arnold even had an older sibling named Benedict Arnold who unfortunately died in infancy. In the colonial period, it was very common for family members to rename children who might have passed away early on the same name. So there's a whole host of Benedict Arnolds. In fact, Benedict Arnold's great-grandfather was also named Benedict Arnold, and he was governor of Rhode Island. Benedict Arnold grew up here in Norwich with his mother Hannah and his father Captain Arnold. His father, Captain Arnold, was a prominent merchant, which means he sold a lot of goods, and he also owned a lot of ships right here in downtown Norwich, right along the harbor. In fact, young Benedict Arnold really enjoyed jumping off his father's ships in the hot summer days. That was a lot of fun for him. Benedict Arnold grew up in a very supportive and nurturing environment with his mother Hannah, his father Captain Arnold, and his siblings as well. He had a whole host of siblings: Mary, Elizabeth, Absalom, and Hannah. They all grew up together and were very fond of each other. They really loved each other. Benedict Arnold was known to be a very rambunctious, kind of silly young boy. He would do a lot of very dangerous things, such as riding a gristmill water mill as it rotated in the water. So can you imagine, just holding on for dear life as you're going underwater consistently? He was known to be a bit of a show-off too. He really enjoyed ice skating here in town. He liked playing near Uncas Lake with his friends. He also would climb Meeting House Rocks, which is not far from where we're standing right here, next to the First Congregational Church. He was really just this ambitious, rambunctious ringleader among his friends. Back in the colonial period, there was a tradition in Norwich where every Thanksgiving, the colonial settlers here would light bonfires for Thanksgiving. So what young Benedict tried to do one time, which was very naughty, but he stole some of the tar barrels that they were going to use to light the big bonfires, and he tried to light it himself, and he almost blew off his arm, which was really bad. So he was kind of naughty at some level as a kid. He was attending school in Montville, Connecticut, not too far from Norwich, but then he was going to school in Canterbury, Connecticut under the master, Dr. Cogswell. Ultimately, Benedict Arnold was hoping to attend Yale. His mother and father really had high hopes for their son, that he would go on to do really great things and get a really great education at Yale and New Haven. Unfortunately, young Benedict Arnold never did attend Yale and never did get his higher education. During this time, his father, Captain Arnold's business started to fail, and he became very sick. The family was suffering financially, and so therefore young Benedict Arnold had to be withdrawn from his schooling in Canterbury, Connecticut. Also at this time, the Arnold family suffered a series of tragedies. Young Absalom, Benedict Arnold's younger brother, died in 1750 due to some sort of disease that was rampant during this time in the colonial period. And then in 1753, Arnold's two other sisters, Elizabeth and Hannah, died 19 days apart from each other in September of 1753. This was a very difficult time for the Arnold family, and a difficult time for all families in the colonial period, because diseases often claimed young children very early on, and it was quite a tragedy that the whole community was facing as well, not only just the Arnold family. There was only one sibling at home who survived the epidemic, and that was Hannah. She was the only sibling aside from Benedict Arnold to survive until adulthood. Hannah Arnold, Benedict Arnold's mother, was determined for her son to receive some sort of education. She turned to her cousins, the Lathrop brothers, Doctors Joshua and Daniel Lathrop, who were apothecaries, or we would call them pharmacists today, who lived on Washington Street here in Norwich town. She asked them and begged them, would they take her young son on as an apprentice, and they agreed. So Benedict Arnold apprenticed for the Lathrop brothers for about 7 years. He became a very skilled apothecary, or pharmacist, and in fact the Lathrop brothers helped him move to New Haven to establish his own apothecary business and bookseller business in New Haven. So next to me is the grave of Hannah Arnold, Benedict Arnold's mother. She died in 1759, and the markings on her gravestone say that she was remembered for being patient, virtuous, and pious. And pious means someone who is very religious. She was very, very into religion here in Norwich Town and was attending church regularly. And that's what is said on her grave about her. She wanted to be remembered as a very pious woman. Next to Hannah, over here, are Mary and Elizabeth Arnold. And these are the young girls that I said passed away 19 days apart from each other in September of 1753. They're right here. And then also next to the girls is Absalom, and he died in 1750. So the Arnold family is right next to each other. But you'll remember that I said that there was an older brother named Benedict Arnold who passed away as a child, in infancy. And then there's his father, Captain Arnold. And both of them were named Benedict Arnold. So I've showed you most of the family, but where are those two? What we think happened is in 1780, this is according to legend that we've heard, but it's based primarily on fact as well. We've heard that in 1780, when Benedict Arnold's treason became known to the people here in Norwich, Connecticut, they came into the burying ground and removed any tombstone that said the words Benedict Arnold on it, because they didn't want to be associated with being the hometown of the traitor. So according to legend, as I mentioned, it was said that they removed the headstones that said Benedict Arnold, which would explain why Captain Arnold's stone and the younger brother, Benedict Arnold's stone, are no longer here, and they pitched them over in the Yantic River. So we don't know that for sure, but that would explain why those two headstones are no longer here. In theory, they should be right here where I'm standing. Captain Arnold should be right next to his wife Hannah, and then the younger Benedict Arnold, the sibling who died in infancy, should be in this same area as well, but his headstone no longer exists either. So now where is Benedict Arnold buried, you may ask? Well, Benedict Arnold is not buried here in Norwich town. He is in fact buried in England with his wife Peggy and his daughter Sophia. They're buried in a church called St. Mary's at Battersea in London. And you might also be wondering where Hannah is, his sibling who also survived to adulthood. She's not buried here either. She's actually buried in St. John's, Canada. And so we only have his mother and his three siblings' headstones here. There is another section of the burying ground where Benedict Arnold's uncle, Oliver Arnold, is also buried as well. After Hannah Arnold passed away in 1759, Benedict Arnold was left to take care of his younger sister Hannah and his very sick father, Captain Arnold. Unfortunately, Captain Arnold passed away in 1761. Afterwards, Hannah Arnold and Benedict Arnold moved to New Haven with the help of the Lathrop brothers and established a new life for themselves there. They never returned to Norwich. The tragedy of losing their parents and their siblings was something that they bore for the remainder of their lives, and they never returned here to the community. Benedict Arnold was really focused on trying to bring honor to his family name, and so he really tried really hard in New Haven to make a name for himself and establish a life there. Next to me is Captain Arnold's brother, Oliver Arnold. Benedict Arnold's uncle is buried here in the Norwich Town burying ground as well. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this virtual look of the Benedict Arnold walking trail. I hope everyone can take the full walking trail by using the self-guided trail brochure or by visiting walknorwich.org and viewing the whole trail virtually as well. I also encourage you to come visit the Colonial Burying Ground here in Norwich Town. Burying grounds and cemeteries are fabulous historic resources in the community, and they're like outdoor museums. They have a lot of history, and they also have a lot of artwork on the headstones as well. So thank you so much for tuning in, and until next time, have a great day and enjoy walking Norwich.